Hi there. I always have to, there's a little delay all the time for me to see that people are here. So welcome. This is the Why Now is a great time to become a toxic mold expert webinar. I'm your host, Bridget Danner. I think this will be a smaller live webinar today, which is kind of fun because I can maybe get to know you guys better, be a little more personal. Hi, CN. If you want to share in the chat where you're from, that's great. I'm in Arizona, sunny Arizona. It's a beautiful day today. And I'm just going to put this in the chat so I have it handy. I'm also doing a webinar in 2 hours with one of our students from the toxic mold training course from the fall. So I thought it'd be cool to share his story and what he's learning. And he's not just learning with us, he's also learned mold like home inspector training. So, and he's been through mold. You know, he has different remedies that have worked for him and his family. So that's a YouTube live similar to this one in 2 hours. Okay, awesome. Here in the US. Yeah, anybody else want to share where they're from? And then we'll get started in a minute. If you're watching the recording, unfortunately, I can't edit out like the intro chit chat, but I'll put the minute that we start the presentation in the notes. Okay, let's get started. I think there's a setting where I can take myself out so you don't see me. Let's see. Oh, I have to do something differently to do this. There we go. Can you guys still hear me now? I think so. I think I was muted when I said, hi, Natalie from Pennsylvania. Okay. So this presentation is a little bit on the timeliness of mold as a topic. And then I'm also going to explore 8 myths about mold that are kind of circulated that I'm going to bust. So it's a fun presentation. And just a reminder, this is not a diagnostic or, doctorly relationship. It's just an educational presentation. And if you haven't met me before, this is me. My name is Bridget Danner, and I was working as an acupuncturist since 2004 in Portland, Oregon, where I got exposed to mold. So I was already kind of in the natural health field when I was exposed to mold, and basically ended up doing more learning because I didn't know what was going on with me. So I ran a busy clinic in Oregon, so I'm very familiar with like different modalities. And more recently, I moved to an online practice in 2016, started to focus more on detox and then on mold. But I have a background in hormones and pain management and gut health. So this is Coach Mickey. She's the other person on our team who does individual coaching, and she also co-teaches with me the Toxic Mold Trained program. So kind of the reason we're doing these webinars is in March, is in April, we're starting our second Toxic Mold Trained live training. So we just want a chance for you to get to know us and our material. Mickey is not as like public as I am, on social media and such, but she's excellent. Her training is really strong. She studied with a lot of different people than me, so we make a nice team. And she's been through mold and also thyroid cancer, so she's a really great, like, detailed oriented coach. And this is a little visual of my own mold story. So I was thinking about it, and I was actually first exposed to mold like 17 years ago, 16, 17 years ago when I moved into this home. But I did not know there was mold in the home for about 8 or 9 years. So I was just getting like slowly sicker, anxiety, period problems, gut health problems, immune problems. Um, so, one of my goals is to help people be more aware of mold so they can consider it sooner. And then, as far as this practitioner training, be helping people get the help they need that's accurate and correct, because there still aren't a lot of mold experts out there. So, even though mold is now more known, um, it's a very complex subject, and sometimes there's some wrong information being put out or just kind of basic information being shared. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay. Okay. And you're welcome in the chat to just share comments or questions, but I'll take them all at the end. Excuse me. So again, today we're just going to talk a little bit about why mold is on the rise, really, and then go through some myths about understanding mold in the home and that kind of a thing. And then, yeah, I'll show you a little bit about our program that starts next month. So just a few slides on the basics of mold. There are actually many species of mold, but not all of them are toxic. But even if they are not, categorized as toxic, they can be a burden on the body. If there's been water damage in the home and there's just a load of mold in the home, there are often several points of water damage in any given home. So there's also, along with the mold, there could be yeast and bacteria, and then there's off-gassing from the home, like from carpets and paint and furniture. So the home can be a very toxic environment. And when I started to get my sickest was when I stopped working in my clinic and started working from home. So no coincidence there, as I started to get a lot more symptomatic. And I didn't really share like the worst parts of my story, but I got strep throat. I wasn't recovering. And then I just was completely exhausted. That's when we finally tested for mold. I also found out before that I was having Hashimoto's. So things just weren't adding up. I was, super careful with my health. I was doing cleanses, and I just was feeling worse and worse. And then when we found out we had mold, we made remediation errors, and my symptoms got even worse. I was having twitching, a lot of poor recall, and like memory loss. So it was definitely a really dark time. So mold can develop, and I'm going to say home, but certainly mold can develop in a car, in your workplace, in an RV, but I'll just use the word home. There's just so many ways that water can enter, right? From, things not drainage issues, humidity, mismanagement, leaks in the walls, weather damage. So that's going to take us to our first myth in a second here. Myth one is that the odds of having mold are low. The odds of having mold, or especially of water damage, are super, super high. Every crawl space that I have one inspector friend, he said every crawl space has mold. It's very common here in the middle. 98% of basements will have water damage. Whether it's heavy weather or just errors in building or maintenance. If you think about the life of a building, will it have water damage over its lifetime? Like, guaranteed it will. And not all those incidents have to end in mold, but some will, because it's not managed correctly. This is a survey of about office buildings and water damage they reported. So 85% said they had past water damage, 45% said they currently had a leak. So it's just really common. And with climate change, that is expected to be more and more. So this is a governmental website just kind of estimating the amount of claims that will be made for flooding that over the next, what time period is it here? Up to the year 2050, the increase they'll see in the next, 25, 30 years of claims because of increased flooding because of climate change. So unfortunately, there is more extreme weather, whether it's like heavy rains in California that, people didn't see coming after their long drought, or, really intense tropical storms in Florida or storms in the East Coast. We're just seeing more extreme weather, and I know that can be debatable. But I think even, more conservative organizations are seeing just like the trend of things like water damage claims, and they're just going up. So not every water damage needs to end in mold, but it does need to be handled correctly, which means really quick action within 24 to 48 hours, things being remediated correctly. And unfortunately, a lot of mold is happening in the walls. So it's just not detected at all. And just because you can't see mold doesn't mean your health won't be affected by mold, because the way that air flows and is kind of pushed around in a building, things move even from inside the wall to into your space. So myth number 2 is that we're all doing fine. We're healthy. And I might have some viewers here outside the US, but I'm showing some statistics here in the US. And I know if you're a health practitioner, our country isn't very healthy, but I just think it's interesting that we don't really talk about it, in the news or in a public way, that we're getting sicker and sicker. So the majority of us have a chronic disease, are obese or overweight. And again, statistically, it's only on the rise. So if you look at some of the top diseases, you may be surprised to think and know about that mold can be involved in things like lung disease, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, kidney disease. So a lot of these top conditions, even diabetes, mold can be related. Are other aspects of lifestyle involved? Certainly, our food quality, our sedentary lifestyle can be involved, but mold can also be involved. There's tons of research on that. If you go to PubMed and you look in a certain disease condition and mycotoxins or mold, there's tons of correlations and a lot of good research about it. So even these things that we consider kind of lifestyle diseases, one of the roots can be in mold. So I put it out this in a recent newsletter, like just citing different conditions and some of the research behind the relation with mold. So you'll have this if unfortunately you can't click on this, but if you want to come back to any of this, you can look at some of these links. So I did pull in a few of the articles there. So this is one on the intestinal barrier and the damage that is caused by mycotoxins to the intestinal barrier. So we know that the gut is such an important place of health, and mold is so destabilizing for the gut. Breaking down that barrier, which can then break down the blood-brain barrier. It lets more particles through that stress the immune system and can lead to autoimmunity. Poor barrier can lead to inflammation in the body. So let's see, let's just read this for you. Mycotoxins on vulnerable structures in the intestines, in particular impairment of the barrier function of the epithelial lining cells and the tight junction, have been noted, and this can result in increased translocation of luminal antigens and pathogens and an excessive activation of the immune system. So for me, I found out I had some Hashimoto's markers just before I found out I had mold. I don't think this is so uncommon because the immune system is being activated and dysregulated potentially for a long time before we even know about it. Um, and that can be, one of the dangers of living in a moldy home, and then all the things that can happen after that. Just a little bit of stats. If you go online and you want to see like the chronic diseases in your state, it's kind of interesting to see that in certain states, depression is higher or asthma is higher or what have you. And here's a little bit about ways in which mycotoxins can make us ill. And one is that the colonization in the nose is really dangerous because it can stay that way for a long time and contribute to ongoing chronic illness. And this is one about if you've already have some pre-existing conditions and then you're exposed to mold, the impact of that combination. So nothing happens really in isolation generally, right? Like if you're a grown person, you've also been exposed to other things, you have other conditions mixing in if you're exposed to mold. So here's a little study that's more positive. It's a study of how curcumin, which is in turmeric, can help balance out some of the dysregulation caused by mycotoxins. So one of the ways mycotoxins dysregulate us that I love to talk about and love to focus on is the oxidative stress it causes. So it's just like dropping like an oxidative bomb in the body, and your body can't make enough antioxidants to counteract it. So there starts to be tissue damage. So curcumin is one, natural product that we can use to help with that restoration. Myth number 3 concerns the dreaded gene, which is the HLA-DR gene. And while this gene, if it's expressing, isn't great for us, it's definitely not the only way you're going to get mold ill. So, a lot of people throw around, well, 25% of us can't target mycotoxins in the body. And it doesn't mean only 25% of us will get sick. Anyone can get sick from toxic mold. And this one gene is not the only factor. So other factors could be your health history, your age, other genes we'll talk about, other stress in your life, how long you've been exposed to mold, and the severity, I think, are big factors as well. Statistically, people who are already having lung issues or immune issues or immune suppression because of drugs they're taking are more susceptible to mold. Infants, the elderly, again, which environment you're in, what you're exposed to can also make you more prone to mold illness. And women, unfortunately, are also more prone to mold illness just because the way our immune system works. So this is that dreaded gene we were talking about earlier, the HLA gene, and it is associated with inflammatory disorders and autoimmunity. So it is, an interesting gene to know about. I personally don't usually test it because it's just sort of extra cost to my clients. And, if you're sick, you're sick. We just need to work on getting you better. Here's a few of the other genes that could play a part in your ability to detoxify. A lot of the genes associated with glutathione are going to help or hurt you in your ability to detoxify. Myth number 4 is focusing too much on mold and not enough on mycotoxins. So mold is a biological material and it's a living thing. So it can be killed, so to speak. But mycotoxins are not living. They're chemical metabolites of mold. And they're smaller than mold. And they can't really be killed. They can be transformed, but they also are very good in embedding in things. And this is where I see a huge mistake with people just not understanding that their belongings are now also affected. So here's a graphic from Richie Shoemaker's website. Obviously, this is inflated quite a bit, but kind of there's mold spores that make mold colonies, and then coming off of those are mycotoxins, which are just kind of like waste products. Um, you can see on the right here, like the different sizes. So mycotoxin is zero point 0.1 micron. Spore fragments, which are super, super common. You know, the spores don't always break off whole, they just break off in little bits, are 0.02 to zero point 0.7. And mycotoxins are often traveling on those fragments into your air. And then the spore itself, which is still invisible to the eye, is 2 to 3 microns for this type of Aspergillus spore. So when I was making this presentation, I found this quote, which is the air in some working environments, including moldy buildings, may contain up to 1 billion spores per cubic meter of air. So you would just have no idea because you can't see it. But I can guarantee you, your body is dealing with that. It's processing that. So another place that mycotoxins and mold can get kind of stuck is in the lung tissue and the very tiny areola of the lung. Feel free to ask more questions about all that later, but I think I kind of got the idea that mycotoxins are a little different and also need to be addressed, and we'll get into it a bit more too. So myth 5 is that mycotoxin testing plus treatment is A plus B equals C. And what I mean by that is I see people test their urine or test their home, and then they just say, oh, I need to find a binder that matches, and that's like the whole story. When it actually, the story is much more complicated than that. So there are limits in testing, and there are, frankly, still some unknowns in treatment, but I can tell you that it's not quite as simple as just using a binder. So just a little bit more explanation on that. One mold species may produce many different mycotoxins, and several species may produce the same mycotoxin. So it's not like you get a urine test of a mycotoxin and you say, oh, that's from Aspergillus. I need a binder for that. There's crossover too. You're also only getting a 1-day sampling or a one-time sampling of what your body was processing on that day. Same within your home, right? You're only getting a 1-day sampling. So the production of mycotoxins by a fungal colony varies with environmental conditions. So here's how a 1-day sampling in your home or your body really too could vary. So if the colony is moist or dry or whatever's going on with it, stressed, it's going to produce potentially different mycotoxins on a different day or time period. It also goes through different growth cycles. So it's kind of producing and doing different things according to like where it's at in its own growth cycle. Also important to understand is that we're getting exposed to many things in concert. So you're not just getting exposed to one mold. You're getting exposed to probably many molds and many mycotoxins, plus VOCs in your house and bacteria, all sorts of things. So it's not so simple as 1 + 1, right? It's like a lot of stuff is going on at the same time. And we don't fully know when we mix different toxins together how the effect is perhaps unique. That's a difficult thing to study. Here's something I found when I was researching for our practitioner training that kind of blew my mind is that even though we know many mycotoxins now, there are many more we don't even know about. And that the first level of mycotoxins may release a second level of mycotoxins that we are not even testing for. So several hundred have been identified. This is we've kind of covered that. And I'll show a little bit about the testing companies. There's 3 urinary testing companies. And before I get this question, I do find that this is the best way to test versus blood allergen tests or blood inflammatory markers, because we're actually testing for mycotoxins and toxic ones at that in the urine. Just note too, if we do a urine test, that is a waste product. So we've been exposed to a mycotoxin. The liver has processed it, sent it to the kidneys to be excreted as urine. And so even though it says we're testing for ochratoxin A, we're actually testing a metabolite of it, if that makes sense. So this is Vibrant Wellness and what they cover in their test. This is Real Time Labs and their testing and how they show their results. And this is a graphic from Mosaic Labs, more in showing the system. So I kind of like this one because instead of just saying, oh, you have ochratoxin from Aspergillus, it's saying you have ochratoxin. These are the body systems it could be affecting. So to me, this is almost like, I don't know, a more useful way to think about it, because really what are we trying to do? We're trying to make your health better so you can function more normally and have a happy life. So we're not just trying to take, A plus B equals C. We're trying to actually restore all these body systems that have been affected. So if you're having memory issues, you're having fertility issues, whatever it is, you can say, oh, well, I'm showing a mycotoxin that's very kidney toxic. And maybe this is explaining why I keep getting, bladder infections. So here's some of the ways that mycotoxins look. They're chemical compounds. So again, just showing that they're chemical compounds. And when we can affect them with certain things like enzymes, it just changes the shape of these compounds, and that can make them no longer toxic. So this is just kind of summing up what I said earlier. And there are some, limitations here. And overall, we want the client to get well. And that is a bigger conversation than just picking out the matching binder. Generally, Mickey and I like binder rotation, binder blends, because they all kind of have a different function, and we'll get more into that. But for now, I would say, my strategy with my clients, and I teach in my book too, is make sure you've got the foundations going first. Some people get really excited about detoxing or trying some fancy treatment, but they're constipated and they're not sleeping and they're barely eating anything. So your body can't really take on the task of heavy detox while you're not even healthy. So you've got to get some things dialed in. And you've got to focus on your environment. This is an environmental illness. And I see, almost like a oversimplification about what to do about your environment that we'll talk about. And it's a complicated issue, right? You have your stuff, you don't know where to move, it's expensive, but it's very important. You're not really going to get well while you're still in the environment. So we can't just focus on the body. We also have to really focus on, are you in an environment that lets you heal? And then detoxing carefully in a way that you can handle, moving lymph, and then restoring those body systems like we saw earlier. So if you've been exposed to mold for a while, even as you get out of mold, it doesn't mean that your immune system, your hormones, your gut are going to just come back like that. They have become really dysregulated, and they often need support to come back. Also, I find that there's a lot of overemphasis on binders. Binders are cool. We're going to talk more about them. We sell one, we sell a couple. I think we sell 3 right now, but they're not the only way to detox. And some of my clients can't tolerate a lot of supplements. And I've had clients go from, moldy urine results to clear urine results, never having used a binder. So just kind of keep that in mind. So as we talked about earlier, the liver can break down and transform mycotoxins through its phases of detox, and then it goes out in the bile or the urine or the sweat. So our body does, neutralize mycotoxins on its own, as does our microbiome in our gut, if it's healthy enough. Also things like sauna, antioxidants, certain foods we'll talk about can help. And in the home, there are various kind of ways and treatments to deal with mycotoxins. So here's a graphic about the liver and the phases of the liver. And again, this can get overlooked and it's so critical, right? So the liver is working really hard when you're in a moldy environment. Some mycotoxins are actually toxic to the liver. So the liver is dealing with that. Plus, we learned earlier that you can be having leaky gut from mold. So now the liver is dealing with more peptides that have come through the gut that the liver now has to process. So the liver is working hard, and the liver needs a lot of nutrition to do its job. It needs a lot of B vitamins, it needs antioxidants, it needs amino acids. So again, skipping ahead to ozone treatments or what have you, if you're not eating a good diet, you're not taking B vitamins, you're not getting enough protein, these are important things that can really go a long way. It's just doing these quote unquote basic things. Like maybe you take 2 doses of B vitamins a day. Maybe you double down your vitamin C. Maybe you, add a protein shake every day. So here's a couple little quotes on how certain mycotoxins are detoxified in the liver. It's kind of interesting, and we'll have another graphic on this here soon. This is a study talking about how a healthy intestinal mucosa can actually conjugate mycotoxins right there in your gut. So pretty interesting. I think, we're all a little exposed to mold, right? So if we have a small enough exposure and a healthy enough gut, I don't think you're going to really see a problem. It's just when the body gets overwhelmed and overexposed. Here are a few more agents that can transform mycotoxin: lactobacillus, Saccharomyces, and prebiotics can all transform mycotoxins in the gut. So super cool information. Here's a chart from Dr. Neil Nathan about certain mycotoxins and which detox pathways they're processed with in the liver, and then foods and supplements that can support that pathway. So this is a reason why we sell broccoli seed and sprout in our shop, because it's one way that you can process and support the liver to support mycotoxin processing. We sell an antioxidant compound. We sell an electrolyte with B vitamins. So we just have different ways to kind of get these antioxidants into you. We sell a couple kinds of glutathione. But again, just with the diet, right? Like, so let's say you're on a budget, let's say you're supplement sensitive, you can just be adding in, more fresh foods, more teas, more berries, more fresh nuts, just simple things can really help your body quite a bit. And they can have an effect to act as a binder, because fiber is one way that we are moving, right? Moving waste out of the colon. So actually foods can act as a binder. Steam cooking greens, which we, all should be eating a serving of every day, and we don't always remember, is a great way. I know my colleague Mickey often starts people, instead of a supplement binder, she starts them on food binders like this, because it's a little easier for the body to perhaps tolerate than a supplement binder. So this is one graphic. I don't think this is the best graphic of all, but and just different types of mycotoxins, of types of binders and the mycotoxins that they've been shown to bind. So binders are really there to help trap toxins in the colon, especially toxins that are released with the bile. So as the body tries to recycle bile salts, you don't want it to recycle back in toxins. So we want those to go out with the stool. So this is our binder on the right, and it was designed just for mold. So it hits a bunch of different mycotoxins, and it moves bile, and it moves the bowels. So a lot of people going through mold are constipated. So it's just kind of keeping things moving. Just another way to get that waste out is just to be making sure you're having bowel movements. So I generally ask people to take this at night, take like 1 or 2 at night, ideally 2, if you tend towards constipation. If you tend towards loose stool IBS, this is probably not the supplement for you. So binders bind more loosely than people realize, which is why sometimes it can make people feel a little sicker potentially. And they can feel sicker on binders if, again, they're not moving the bile and not moving the bowels, or if they come in sort of too early in the treatment protocol. So just also remembering that mold can be hiding in other places like the sinuses. So, while we can work on binding, we also need to work on clearing out other areas of the body. Okay, moving into a little bit about home testing. I think it's really important if you want to do this work as a practitioner to know a decent amount about the home, because people are going to be coming to you with questions, and if you're just like, I don't know, just do this, like it's not very helpful. So this is a picture of our home when we were having it re-sided because there was water damage under the siding. It's a environmental illness, so you need to be able to speak confidently about the environment. And of course, you can refer out for like inspection or this or that, but you need to have some knowledge. Also, if you take our program, you may want to focus more on the home side. There's definitely a need out there for people to understand their test results, have an unbiased opinion about, how to remediate this kind of a thing. So that's a great niche. So I kind of just talked about that a bit. That specialty. About 25% of our course is about the home. So one thing I hear frankly, from practitioners is, oh, go get an ERMI and then we'll know what's going on with your home. Okay, so an ERMI is a dust test that they usually ask you to take samples all around your house. So if it comes back that there's mold, how do you know what area is affected? Also, an ERMI was not designed for a residential home. So when you get the test back, it's confusing, frankly. So there's ways to, interpret that and make more sense of it. But just telling your client to run an ERMI and then they give it back to you and they say, well, what do I do now? And you're going to say, well, I don't know, right? Because you don't have enough information. So you can't just run a dust test. If you own the home, you also need to have it inspected, whether it's yourself through you've gotten trained or you bring in a professional. But a dust test is not enough information, right? So I kind of mentioned earlier, still the biggest mistakes I see around the home are contamination. So bringing items with you, putting items in your car, that's still the biggest mistake I see. As far as mistakes I see practitioners make, I think it's being too black and white about what to do next. So you've got a client, again, in a very stressful situation. They know that there's mold where they're living. They're sick, their brain isn't working great, maybe they have a family and they don't really know what to do. So just saying, well, I'll work with you when you move or just move or whatever is just, it's kind of callous and oversimplified, right? So lots of truths are happening all at the same time for this person. They are concerned about their health, but they're also concerned about their budget or not disrupting the kids and what have you. And I don't mean that means they should stay, but I'm just saying it's a complicated decision and you want to guide them through that with resources rather than just being like, well, just move. That's one mistake I hear quite a bit. So we also teach in the course like ways to look for mold yourself and little tools you can use and areas you can look at and how. Here's some graphics about looking for like staining and buckling as a sign of water damage. Here's one tool that is super easy to have, just measuring your humidity. So for example, for us, we had too high of humidity in our basement and mold was growing in there and we just didn't even know. We just didn't know that that was something we needed to keep in check. Here's a little graphic on finding an inspector and some of the credentials they may have. Um, so this is just a snapshot, but we teach more about it in our course. This is some things about home testing methods and like the pros and cons of them. Mickey is really good on all the home stuff. She's really got a lot of experience on it. Oops. Oh, here we go. So that was that. And then myth 8, which is our last one here, is just use bleach, right? So we've all heard about that. There actually is an ingredient in bleach that can kill mold, but the problem is bleach is mostly water, which can also feed mold. And it's usually used in a way like just, pour it in the wall and then paint over it. It's not a proper remediation. So remediation is like a multi-step, detailed process to prevent more contamination. So again, we can't oversimplify the remediation process. It is annoying, it is complicated, and you have to be really careful. That's just how it is. Here's a little graphic about hiring a remediator and some questions to ask so that you can hire a good remediator. So there's different people you can get involved if you are a homeowner and you're making decisions on your home so that you get, more than one perspective. So this is just sort of a sampling of the world of mold and I hope I didn't overwhelm you. Like, hopefully, if you're here, you have some familiarity with this topic. And I always encourage people to just learn little by little. Like, there's no test at the end, right? If one or two things stuck out for you today, then that's great. But I just wanted to kind of show there's a lot to this field, and Mickey and I are in it, and we have opinions on it because we work in this field and we're not just saying stuff, right? We've really seen, in practice what's best for the client, how to handle different home situations. And we know that there's a need for more of this out there. So we created this practitioner level program. So some people who take the program are not practitioners per se. Maybe they're doing it for their family. They're doing it because they're in the real estate business. They're doing it because they just want to maybe go into this field in some way. So I like that there's some variety. We've had some pharmacists come through. We have our first few international students, which is super cool. But there's really a need for more accurate information out there so that people don't end up wasting a lot of money. I wasted a lot of money in my journey because I just didn't know. We contaminated 2 cars. We moved items around our house that we shouldn't have done. We just made mistakes that, if there were more resources out there that were just readily available, we might have been more careful from the get-go. So here's a few of our former students, and we may have some former students retake the course, so that's kind of cool. They can kind of serve as like mentors for you guys. And again, we have different types of people who have joined. We've had definitely a handful of FDNs, and I'm an FDN, so that's super cool. We actually had a few acupuncturists last time, which I liked because my first training is in acupuncture. And we've had some people who are just thinking that they want to do this kind of work because they've been through mold themselves. So I really love that too. I love that people have a calling and they're following it. I was the same way. It's not something we do to get, rich and famous. It's just something we do because, we care and we know how hard it was for ourselves. So just a couple more slides here. This is the format of the course. It's an 8-week live course, but if you can't make it, it is recorded. So it's 8 weeks in a row. It takes 1.5 to 2 hours. We have transcripts, we have slide decks, we have references for you. So, you can go back and um, reference again, like things you learned. We do give you a certification if you have taken the test. In some cases, you can get continuing in ed depending on your certification. We will list you in a directory if you choose when the course is done so people can find you. We added a case studies call this time, and we are doing more case studies in general because we had feedback that people just wanted more case studies. So here's quickly some things we cover in the 8 weeks together. Things that kind of stand out here, I would say mast cell is a big conversation, detox reactions, how to deal with mold colonization. Again, the home side is always confusing. We go over home testing, body testing. We also go over other tests like hormone tests, gut tests that we use that help round out, the information for the client. Bowel movement, types of binders, symptoms, stages of healing, dealing with making the best protocol is something that I focus on a lot. And it's not cookie cutter, it's based on where the client's at in the moment and what they're capable of. There's a mom of 3 kids and the husband's always gone at work and she's really sick. Like there's only so much you can ask her to do, to be honest. So we try to make the treatment fit the person. There are a number of bonuses that I've been thankful for from friends, including like mold testing kits, mold training, environmental health training. That's all free when you join the course. And this is, I think, the last slide. So this is the link for it. You can actually use your phone to pull up the link to the page and see some of the things I was talking about. My little cursor is broken, so one sec. I'm going to just put the link in the chat and then take some questions. Sorry, my little mouse pad isn't working, so I'm being a little weird about it here. Okay, so I put the link in the chat, but here's the join page, and there's a pretty long frequently asked questions section that you can look at, and the bonuses. So like if you're like, I don't know, just different things about access and time it takes and all that is on the page. Okay. Hi, Ray. Yeah, I would definitely follow our newsletter, and I think I'll do the course in the fall. I'm not doing this to be difficult, but I actually am in school right now too. So I haven't figured out my whole life next year, but I would like to do it in the fall, but we don't have a firm plan. So if we do in the fall, it'd probably be like just before Thanksgiving, like September, October. And if we can't keep doing it live, we can make it like a pre-recorded course. But I really like doing it live because I liked, we usually spend 30 to 45 minutes on questions every single time. So that's pretty valuable time so that you can kind of process all the information. So yeah, make sure you're on my newsletter. You can just go to like bridgetdanner.com and get like a free gift. You may already be on it, but then we'll announce the next time it comes around. Dr. Tim, what are the benefits of testing urine versus blood? I don't think there's much use to me personally in testing mold via blood because it's like more of like an allergen immune response and it's not telling you like the levels in the body. So the other type of blood testing that relates to mold is different inflammatory markers, and that's the way like Dr. Shoemaker used to test. So they are testing inflammation levels, and you can see how those are changing over time. But again, they're not mold specific. They're not telling you like this inflammation is from mold. So that's why I prefer urinary testing. I like blood testing for things like thyroid, blood sugar, immune health. Blood testing is really valuable, but it's not going to tell you do you have a certain mold in your body or like what is the exposure. So hope that clarifies that. Teresa is asking about a company that does a dry vapor treatment claiming to kill and remove active mold, and they don't have to get rid of any of their belongings. Yeah, I don't. I've seen these same kind of claims, and I really don't agree. If there's been, say, drywall that's been water damaged and has mold, I just don't really feel like doing a spray treatment and airborne treatment is enough. And if you go on my YouTube, I've interviewed a lot of people in the building space, right? Because it's not my background, so I interview a lot of people. There isn't one single one who says, "Oh, just do like a vapor treatment." You will, however, see some people saying, "Oh, I did this special treatment in my house, and that's all I needed." And it's just not like best practices. So I think we're always looking for a shortcut in this field because it's a pain and it's expensive. But just like there isn't a shortcut for the body, there isn't a shortcut for the home either. So I don't know that particular company. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but this is just in general kind of what I hear and see. Walt had a stachybotrys infection. Wow, you had a grapefruit-sized ball of candida. Oh, and you use chlorine dioxide. Yeah, that's another treatment that is a little, like, controversial, but I have heard some good things about. I think it's beyond the scope of, like, something Mickey and I recommend just because of, it probably can be done wrong. But yeah, I've heard some good things for sure. I think there's so many treatment options. I hope I don't know if I stressed that actually enough in the presentation. So if a client is sensitive, if a client's on a budget, there's so many options. I've had clients come to me and they're like, I've tried everything. There's nothing you can do. But so many things can help, right? Breathing techniques, red light therapy, like, just like simple stuff, cooked greens, like we talked about. I've seen some sensitive clients and I've had them be able to get better. So just I think it's just important to say there's like always options for all, I don't really believe like, oh, there's a one protocol, there's one way to do things. There's actually a big menu of things we can choose. So I've had people get a lot better on like high vitamin C treatment and and that's very inexpensive. So there's definitely lots of options out there, which is good news. Hi Lisa. Sorry, you're bogged down at work. Yeah, as soon as we end today, the recording will be available at the same exact link. That's why I love these YouTube lives because it makes the link so easy for you guys to access. Russell said, removal of all spores, dead or alive, is vital. Fogging is not a recognized treatment. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Fogging is a step, usually in the cleaning up step. And they can fog like the cavities, they can do different treatments inside the walls. I know I had a question on Instagram and a holistic realtor chimed in about like even inside the like say you find out that some of the support beams of your home were moldy in your new build. And I was like, "Could you just fog that area?" And she's like, "No, you still just can't even fog that." Like, it's just not the best practices. So, yeah, I think luckily since I've been through mold myself, I think we spent $80,000 on our home. which was through a HELOC. We didn't have that money. Maybe it was home and health. I mean, probably the number is more like 100,000 now. But we spent so much money and we made so many mistakes. So um, I feel like I can ask people the hard ask because we had to do the same hard things ourselves. Get Our house was a bad mold situation, and I don't own anything from that house anymore. And that was really hard for me. Things that I worked hard to buy, I just had to get rid of and start over. And then I was afraid to buy new furniture because I thought it would be, ruined again. Um, it's a lot. It sucks, So, but just like say your house burned down in a fire, you wouldn't try to still live in it. You have to start over. And when you have a severe mold situation, it's that bad with your home, but yet we try to still stay in it and take this and do this. And um, it's because we can still see it and it seems fine, but it's not fine. So we have to take it really, really seriously. And I mentioned briefly like those chronic diseases and the mold, but maybe I should mention too, like if you stay in mold, and I have clients going through this, say they're fighting with their HOA or something, or they have some tie to their home that they're not, mentally able to let go of, they're getting sicker and sicker. They're not getting better. They're getting sicker and sicker. And that can lead to, more severe neurological problems or these more severe conditions. So it is really dangerous. So we have to definitely take it seriously. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you, Teresa, for sharing that. Yeah, I don't quite know what to say, but you're welcome to come take our course, and we can explain more about that. We're actually having Mike Rubino from Home Cleanse come on as a guest speaker in our course. So I know he's not going to recommend just fogging, right? He does the moldy homes of the rich and famous because he's someone who's really has a good reputation of doing a really careful job in the space. Tina said, yeah, her HOA was a huge source of stress. It sucks. It sucks. I hate HOAs in general. And they never fully, they never recognize the severity of mold and want to properly handle it. I've also had clients in townhomes and especially in like condos, like in New York City. I think they don't call them condos, they call them something else. But like, let's say your neighbor above you and also beside you aren't treating their water damage properly. Well, that's coming into your walls, and you don't seem to really have the right to force them to handle it properly. They can just tell you to take a walk. It's horrible. It's horrible. So I'm just always a fan of like moving on, whether you own, you rent, like, let's move on. Let's cut our losses. Let's move on. Not to say that that's easy. I talked about that, but staying to fight the fight, it just never seems to really work out. And I've had good friends and clients like spend a lot of money to remediate their house properly, to get new belongings. But if you make one mistake, you're sick again in the home, or say the home floods again, or some new water damage. Like, I haven't seen that many instances of successfully staying. Now, if you join the course and Mike comes on, he'll probably tell you different. He's remediated a lot of homes and people were able to stay. But I can tell you, Mike is not cheap. Right? You're spending like, 100 grand to do it correctly, or more. Probably nowadays it's more. So to do it really, really correctly is like, pretty much like having a surgeon come out and, excise everything and clean properly. And it's just a lot. So yeah, we need better housing laws. So one thing, Tina, I think I have offered to one of my mold advocacy friends is that they can come take the course. So we may have a few folks who are already doing mold advocacy work in the course, which is fantastic. I think, I kind of stay out of the legal part, But when they've kind of explained to me, like, just like asbestos and lead, right? We have laws to protect us around those substances because we now know they're dangerous. And there aren't such laws around mold. There just aren't, but there could be. So it could be something that we see change with the right advocacy work. And it's, these are in military barracks, these are in military housing, these are in schools, these are in hospitals. So we do need better laws. So that's another way, some people are getting involved is to, give back and do legislation or encourage legislation state by state in mold. And the idea is that if it's in many states, then federally it can become more of a standard as well. Okay, there's 2 or 3 questions more I'm going to take here, and then we'll wrap up. Oops. Suzanne, steaming vegetables. It's just in reference to this idea of using it as like a binding agent. So is it better? I don't know. I just say there's been some like studies or testing around using steamed greens as like, a binding agent. So I think steamed is more digestible than raw. But not to say like never eat raw food, but steamed, kale or something is just easier to digest than raw kale. So I think in that sense, I think steaming is good. But if it's opposed to stir frying or something, I'm not saying the stir frying is like bad. I think this study was on steamed vegetables in particular. Not to say it wouldn't work for some other ways. Tina said in Germany, it's illegal to sell a home that makes people sick. Yeah, I mean, there's a little protection here. Like if you know you have mold, you need to disclose it. But yeah, I don't know the full extent of it. If you go on my YouTube, I did interview a lawyer named Christina Baer, and you can find my interview with her. Janice, how much of a role of mycotoxins in food plays a part versus the environment? Okay, great question. Here in the US, or in most like developed countries, we're not having like a huge problem with mold in food, and that we have refrigeration, we have food quality. Not to say it's perfect. So the biggest mold contaminated food here in the US is corn and any corn products. But yes, there can be mold in like nuts that you buy or spices or coffee. Lower quality is generally higher chance of some contamination. Also, how long have you been storing it? So Coach Mickey recommends you take, I think it's just like a 5-day or week cleanse of any moldy foods before you do a urine test, just to make extra sure nothing's showing up from food. So that being said, most of our clients eat pretty well. They're not eating a bunch of gross, random food. They're eating a clean, fresh diet. So I don't think it's a big problem. I also will say that Mosaic Labs has done a test internally. They had like a group of, normal people not complaining about any health stuff, eating just a standard American diet, regular stuff. And they took the mold test and they were negative. So I think they're trying to say just eating a normal diet won't usually show up as being, oh, you're mold toxic. It's maybe playing like a tiny part, but it's not going to play a huge part. The bigger part is if you are currently exposed or you're colonized from a past exposure. So the amount of exposure in environment versus food is just a lot more impactful. So not to say that zero mycotoxins can come in through the diet. They can, but through a normal, like healthy diet, it's not really a big problem, generally speaking. Even the coffee thing, there's some coffee is really, really cheap, low quality. It could be moldy, but high quality coffee should not be moldy. So there's a lot more we could talk about, but the bigger issue is always the environment. So, Janice, mycotoxins would be in food from mold being in food. They wouldn't really be in there any other way than if, like, it was a grain that got moldy. So now there's mycotoxins being released. Um, so yeah, mycotoxins can be infiltrating like fabrics and stuff in your house, but they're not going to be like infiltrating like food in the field unless there's like mold on the food crop. Then there could be releasing mycotoxins in the food. Okay. I think we can, let's see. Natalie, I'm not sure about laser and mold in the body. I haven't heard any reference to that. But I love that you're an acupuncturist. And again, we had like 3 acupuncturists in our last mold course, which I thought was really cool. Definitely a fan of Chinese medicine and how it can support the body systems as you go through mold. I think it can be a good like adjunct to the other things you're doing to improve your environment and detox the body. So I think that's awesome. Well, typical recovery time really, really varies with your exposure time. Um, Honestly, I think a couple years is reasonable because it might take you a year to detox and then another year to kind of recover your systems. So it's a slower timeline than people give it credit for. So really great questions. Thanks, guys. I'll just share one more time the Toxic Mold Train page. The registration closes on the 31st and the course starts April 2nd, I believe. We will email you, if you registered for this, we'll email you a recording of today and like a summary of some things we covered today. Oh, and later today, if you're interested, I'm interviewing Jesse Monza, who was one of our students. He's now a trained mold inspector. So he went from being a normal guy who got exposed to mold with his family to wanting to work in this space in some capacity, even if it's just part-time. So he's coming on in just 1 hour from now here on YouTube Live to talk about his story and his symptoms and what helped him, his journey, some of his frustrations with the mold like inspection side and things he's learned. So it should be a good conversation. Let me give you the link in the chat. Kind of a weird day to do 2 in one day, but here we are. Dr. Tim, we do talk about ozone a little bit in the course. Mickey's used ozone more than me. She owns an ozone machine, so she covers it more. I did receive some ozone, but she knows quite a bit more about it. So that's a cool thing she brings to the course. So here again is that link to the YouTube later today. In 52 minutes if you want to join us. But thank you so much to everyone who was on. Really appreciate you guys and that you're learning about this field. If you're going through mold, wishing you all the best. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, I promise. And let's stay in touch. Thanks, everybody. Bye.